Welcome. So today we speak with my friend Bryan, a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and advisor. He's CEO of Playbook Media and Growtall. Playbook Media is a full-service digital marketing agency that uses experimental learning, or experimental design, I should say, science, deep channel expertise, and nimble creative resources to produce unmatched direct responses and results that expand customer relationships for their clients. Growtall is a market network that empowers marketers to independently and collectively connect with and serve businesses that need their expertise. Welcome, Bryan.
Thanks, Luis. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So we'll dive right into it. You and I kind of started chatting, I think, uh, post or maybe around like quarantine times, and you were a great mentor and just kind of giving me as a startup agency in more like the IRL world of events that got fully shut down, trying to pivot into some of our consulting. And so you're pivotal really in helping me understand a lot of the world that you play in, from digital marketing to more of like the strategy side in that. So I wanted to thank you first and foremost. And with that, kind of roll into the first topic. So if you don't mind, kind of give me the current digital marketing lay of the land, maybe 2 to 3 areas within social media, digital marketing in general that you currently find most important and are focused on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, thanks for the good words. I was happy to be help and happy to hear that I had any part in your journey. So it's always good to hear. In terms of the industry, I mean, God, there's so many me movie pieces as there always are in digital marketing. Um, but I think, some of the big areas of focus that we're looking at right now is the regulatory landscape, as well as kind of the rise of the walled gardens in terms of data privacy and sharing. Obviously, almost all marketers were hit by iOS 14, had a lot of trouble with meta advertising after that, and are having lots of troubles in terms of attribution and measurement, understanding really where they should be putting their next dollar of advertising. Another piece is, creative. Everybody was pushing influencers for a long time. You're seeing lots of different UGC creative, and there's just tons of different ways that you can be producing creative and sort of what's the right creative to be producing and how do you adequately budget for that.
Mhm.
And then I would say the last piece is the rise of AI, right? Everyone's
The
seeing
hot topic.
Chat GPT, this and that, but there are also all these other really interesting use cases for AI that people aren't talking about as much, where I actually think that they have more direct impact to marketers and how they could be leveraging AI today without having to get into the Chat GPT kind of hole, if you will.
Yeah,
Although, it has its place, but I think that there are a lot of other use cases of AI that people.
I love that. Yeah, and with that, I mean, if we go into, maybe the hot topic and then work our way backwards,
Sure.
I think the most recent is what the latest version of ChatGPT, the Auto GPT, where
Auto
it's like,
GPT, yeah.
now we're having the AI talk to each other and formulate again some sort of leverage assistance. Have you toyed or what has been maybe a practical use case for marketers with that tool or with ChatGPT in general that you found useful?
I haven't used Auto GPT too much yet, but I have an understanding of kind of the concept of it in terms of a loop of learnings, right? Until you can get really the result that you want out of it.
Hmm.
So I can't necessarily speak to it as much because I haven't experimented with it, but we have experimented a bit with GPT-4 and I think that with all of these things for marketers in particular, whenever you're thinking about text creation and even image creation, is it's going to be a human plus AI sort of situation. And we've already been there, right? Media buying is already like that. For example, nobody goes out and places individual CPC bids any longer. And media buying, you have a whole bunch of AI systems on the other side, and so what you're trying to do is you're trying to train the AI systems to give you the results that you want. And the results that come out the other side are things that humans could not produce easily, right?
Hmm.
And so whenever you're thinking about generative AI, it's like, well, I want a different bunch of different permutations of this ad, or I need to quickly write some copy, but what I get out of it is probably not going to be perfect. It's not going to be what I would actually want to use uh, to directly, entice humans to take an action that I want them to, but it's
Right.
going to get me a lot of the way there, right? Or there might be some permutations that actually do, but it's going to take a human's eyes to cut out the noise
Yeah.
and to get to the thing that you actually want. So I think it's going to be more of an efficiency play than it
Hmm.
is a replacement. But I do think that all advertisers, all marketers should be playing with this stuff now, because if you're not doing it in the future, you're not going to get replaced by machines. You're going to get replaced by humans that are using machines.
That's so true. That's a good point. And I mean, even if we uh, dive into that a little bit deeper and kind of like look at that leverage point, that has been a common theme. And one, just kind of diverting the noise of tools and shiny object syndrome as, marketing tools, as well as just business, the next hot trend or the algorithm chases. There's a key, I think, opportunity moment here, maybe, where, like you said, you can become the driver of these tools. And also, like a lot of these things, the almost subtle learning or opportunity is to learn how to not be distracted by them, right? And to pick
True.
out what is useful in them, because there's a lot there. And even going into like one of the first things you mentioned with some of the other, issues or opportunities within the marketing and digital landscape, with, for example, when we get into, the iOS issue, right? That
Yeah.
has been now, again, an opportunity in and of its own to really speak to specific audience, narrow down some of the fundamentals, I think, wouldn't you say, of like marketing, of not just shooting at the hip, but being more targeted in your audience. Have you seen any, I guess, real wins from companies trying that sort of more just fundamental aspect of speaking to an audience, using these tools? And any of those examples that maybe you can speak to kind of paint a picture of how these things are actually maybe not, they're new, but they really provide almost a magnifying glass to what is important in terms of fundamentals of marketing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I hear what you're saying on that. Like it's really about like an audience creative match, right? Like are you speaking to the right audience with the right messaging, if you will? And I think that there's some interesting developments there, that there are a number of companies that are coming up that are doing these kind of first party data, where they, it's kind of third party data, but they own the data, right? And
Okay.
then they're going to come in and build audiences for you, and they're claiming that they can leverage, huge data sets to build these high intent audiences, and they're going to be able to outperform anything that you're doing yourself. I think in places like programmatic, where you don't have great audience later in the back end, that there is a lot of power in bringing these audiences to the table, because they can get a level of intent and signal that you want to be able to get yourself. In somewhere like Google, or Meta, we're not as big believers in using third-party audiences, because we think that they have the level of data and machine learning, and AI to do it themselves. And so we usually lean more into their systems. And then on the other end, you have these AI creative folks, who there are a few different flavors of this, right? There's this pure generative AI where you're going to get net new creative made by AI. And we haven't seen great results from that yet.
Yeah.
I think you may get there at some point, but usually what they produce, just even if it looks good on the surface, whenever you take a little bit of a longer look, it's not right. And I think humans' intuition, you actually see it. There's something off
Hmm.
in the beginning. And so just that thing, like, yeah, it's amazing when you see it on a LinkedIn post, but is it actually going to sell a product? And our experience, the answer is generally no. But there's another side of it, which is leveraging modular creative, where you actually go out and create all the assets yourself. and build it into a modular format and let AI figure out the right permutations of those different components. And that's pretty interesting because then you might be able to find the right permutation for Luis might be different than what you'd see for Bryan. And if you plug it all into the systems, it's going to start to learn, oh, hey, guys from Texas like this and guys from Southern California like that. And you can get a better result by leveraging AI to learn on the best kind of permutations of that modular creative.
That makes
Um,
sense.
and I think where what I haven't seen yet, but I think is going to be really interesting is whenever you layer like both of those things together,
Okay.
say into a programmatic or connected TV space, where all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of different audiences that are created, mix it with the creative, and then start trying to figure out what's the best one to deliver. And that's going to be a little bit more like what Meta has kind of built off the shelf for themselves.
Gotcha. Yeah, I saw your post on the Roku acquisition kind of being a vehicle for that gameplay, right?
Yeah,
I mean
yeah,
that breaks down into again some of the concept too of simple scales, fancy fails, right? As Alex Hermosi talks about recently, to where at any level, if an individual or a company's trying to like get fancy too early, right? Like us as a startup, if we try to play too much in a lot of these things that we think, a company at this level has to do or is doing, it can be very distractive. And the same thing with teams on more robust projects or, just further down in the journey, they can also kind of overload themselves in all these tools and ways and
sure.
systems. And as you said, the human that we are selling to, be it B2B or direct to consumer, we're going to pick up on a lot of these little things, right? Like with the creative, with these moments that make marketing, again, fundamentally attractive, a communication vehicle, and something that actually converts. So let's switch gears, but still kind of within that. If we're talking, say, full funnel marketing, which I know you've been, kind of speaking on it for a while, how can, say, a bootstrap company or lean team use some of the simplified versions of full funnel campaigns?
Yeah. And I think with lean, right? The hard part about lean is your budget constrained,
Hmm.
right? It's like you just don't have that much money to put into it, so you can't put a lot into the different areas of the funnel. You can't think about driving an awareness campaign and an acquisition campaign separately because you probably don't have enough data to figure out what's working there.
Right.
And so I think it's more important for someone like that to think about it in a consolidated nature. So depending on the type of product, right? So some products require more intent, and we think about that in terms of like channel product fit, right? So if you're selling insurance, for example, you're only in the market for insurance sometimes, and so you're better off starting off on a Google there, where you can get into the intent immediately and just buy people's keyword searches. But if you're selling something like a Theragun, when Theragun came out, nobody knew what these massage guns even were.
Right.
And so there's no search volume for it. So you have to get in and go into a social to where you can drive awareness of the product so you can develop that demand and then get people to purchase. Right. So the first piece is figuring out which one is right for you. Are you kind of a Google type of company or are you a Meta kind of company? And usually those are the first two channels that I would suggest starting on if you're going to be doing paid media. Um, uh, and then in that, how do you build brand into your campaigns? And that's really important, I think, is that, there are a lot of people that sort of think about it as two separate things, like, oh, I have DR or I'm running brand. But when you think about it more from like a branded response, right? How do you drive a lasting impression that drives awareness, consideration, intent, and then to purchase? And that comes into your creative strategy. And so if you're early on, you got to think about it a little bit from the bottoms up, right? So the product matters, how you design your product, if it's a physical product or if it's a digital product, like what does the website look like? Both cases, what does the website look like? But it's
Hmm.
physical. You got to start with that product, make it beautiful, make it stand out, then go to the website, make that a unique experience, but not so unique that it gets in the way of conversion. and then go into your ads and your creative and your messaging and make sure that you have brand woven into the entire customer journey. And then once you get into a point where you're larger and you have more budgets, you can start thinking about, do I run brand campaigns in addition to DR? But again, you still want to measure, is that incrementally driving more revenue for me or not?
Yeah.
But there is a use case for having separative initiatives once you get to that size.
That makes sense. So what I'm hearing is almost like within, say, we're talking the pre-purchase, purchase, post-purchase journey, right, of the clock model. Then one, depending on the product that you're speaking to and how it lays in the market, if it's a product that needs education versus if it's a product that is, like insurance, you buy it at a certain moment, you target a certain stage, maybe in life or in yeah, age or situation. So in that, also you kind of double click that and you would maybe look at how do you build brand into either the creative as well as maybe the narrative. And say
Hmm.
as a scaling company, you figure out, okay, this is my resources, this is my bandwidth, this is what we have, this is our product. So uniquely to our product, service, CPG, whatever it is, that in and of itself will kind of narrow down more of where we will allocate that sort of full funnel with brand being specific to that market. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's right. Is that you want to weave brand into every step point. Like every time you interact with a customer, it's an opportunity for you to reinforce a brand message, right? And so in that, you start to create more of a full funnel thought process because you're not thinking about just am I converting this customer today? It's what did I leave a lasting impression or didn't I? One thing I left out in this is the idea of community too, right? Once you
Mm,
start getting people in as customers, can you build a level of customer evangelists and a community around your product? Because if you have that, that ends up becoming a real core piece of your, you know, unique value proposition. Because now you're one of us. Like taking a thing from Seth Godin, right?
yeah,
People like us buy things like this, and so
yeah.
you want to create the idea of people like us have this product or buy this type of product.
That's a great reminder. Yeah, because anybody at any level can do that, and baking that into it is part of, again, whether you have the budget for a community manager, Facebook group, if that's even something that, for example, as a service business may or may not make sense, still building the people like us do things like this philosophy is, again, fundamental
Yeah.
to marketing. So I guess let's roll into maybe some of your biggest learnings, if you don't mind sharing. What has been maybe some of the biggest challenges in terms of maybe using efficiency and growth for a service-based business, for both what you do with Playbook and with Grow Tall? And as a side or additional question, have any of these either systems or processes for efficiently benefited you personally to just live more fully engaged? Before the conversation started recording, we were talking about the moving, being remote now in Southern California versus
Hmm.
the Bay Area. And I'm guessing some of that had to do with, again, lifestyle and some sort of systems for freeing up time to live a full life. So could we interweave those two of what has been challenges and what has been some learnings in that processes that you do or don't apply as a human and as a CEO?
Yeah, man, so many learnings along the way. You're building a business. It's essentially a fail forward philosophy, right?
Yeah.
So lots of mistakes along the way and learnings that have been since able to apply to things. And so I guess if I think about it chronologically, that's probably the easiest way to approach it. I think stepping out in the beginning, I was smart to leverage my network to help build this initial business. But I think I could have pushed it harder. And that's one area where, in terms of growth of our business, we're largely referral based in terms of the new customers we bring in, and continuing to incubate that network, really pay attention to the people in it, make sure you're front and center, that you're providing value to them up front. Those things all really matter in terms of driving, reputation and growth of your business. So, kind of going back to what we were initially saying around building your brand, right? It's
Hmm.
about the multiple touch points you have, and so within your customers, but also the evangelists of you as a service. it's really important to just stay in front of those people and keep those relationships tight. And I think we've done a good job over time, but there are areas where I think I could have invested a little bit more early on, that could have catapulted us a little bit further along the way. Um, Moving forward, hiring my COO was one of the smartest things I ever did. At a certain point, you need another leader in the room who's really experienced. And I was at least smart enough to figure that out early on. I was only about a year and change into the business before I hired her. But having a good operator has been essential for me because I'm very much an idea person, very much I do fall victim to shiny object syndrome from time to time. And I
Mhm.
love building, and I needed a strong operator on the other end. So really understanding your personality and strengths and weaknesses and making sure that you bring in people to offset your weaknesses rather than trying to fix them outright. Because I'm a big believer that we're kind of born with the personalities we have, and so you want to double down on your strengths and then hire against your weaknesses as a
Mhm.
leader. Um, then, when the pandemic hit, and we went fully remote, I remember whenever I was sitting at home and I was spending all this time with my family, and I was like, damn, I never spend time with my kids. Like I did not spend it. I always thought of myself as a family man, like I'm a good dad, etc. But
Yeah.
before we went fully remote, I was at the office so much, working so much that I really didn't realize how shallow my relationship was with my children.
Mm.
And in going fully remote, that did open up my eyes to that. And since I've tried to build a lot more into spending time with the family and not over-indexing on work. And I think that's made me a lot happier as a person and helped a lot with the
Sure.
family dynamics. Uh, there's a trade-off though, now I got the kids running in the background half naked or whatever into my VCs. So I've had to put a lock on the door here and have some create some separation. But I think net net it's a big benefit. Um, let's see. Other things. Be careful of hiring too fast. Sometimes I was a little bit quick to just put someone in a seat because we're growing quickly.
Yeah.
But getting the right people in is really smart. And then on the other side, if they're not working, being faster to let them go.
Mhm.
I'm very much a relationship person, and so letting people go is really hard. But sometimes it's just a square peg, round hole kind of scenario. And what I found is everybody lands on the other side. They're all fine. It's not
Yeah.
like I put them on the street.
Right.
So just making those decisions a little quicker as a leader, I think, is smart. Trying to think if there's something else. In that, resourcing as an agency can be difficult because you want to cross sell on additional services, but you haven't hired the talent.
Mhm.
Or when you're growing quickly, can you hire quick enough? Or when you have client churn, can you downsize fast enough?
Mm.
GrowTal gives us this amazing bench of talent so we can cross sell on additional services. We can bring on talent that we've already vetted quickly. And since they're hourly, we can ramp them down, say if there's a change in the economy or something like that, which we've gone through a bunch of, right?
Mhm.
And so it's been really helpful in terms of managing costs for us and providing
Mhm.
additional lines of service that we can bring into the agency. So I guess shameless plug if there are other agency leaders out there listening, we can provide the same thing for them. But I found that to be really useful to have a bench of talent. And I have to give credit to one of my advisors, Bev Carlton, who she's amazing HR professional, and she's done like everything from Google to LinkedIn to Pinterest, and she had given me the idea of having a bench of talent, and so productizing that I think was pretty useful.
Nice. Yeah, that's the ultimate hack there. And I think even on what stood out for me is more of again, the balance and the trade-off of that, because we're making those trade-offs, I think, day by day. And so even if we run it back to the beginning of the conversation, like we have For example, with you deciding and realizing what was going to make you happier, which in theory is also going to make you a better business, leader, a better human being in general, right? If those things are in play. And all the other learnings that come from it, they came just like the pandemic, just like figuring out that we can work remotely, we can remove ourselves as bottlenecks through challenges. And then even further back, we as marketers, whether it's iOS changes or, the world shutting down or anything that happens as part of, you know, just the trends of being a human and the society that we're in today that we're very blessed and lucky by, we have problems that come up that we are solving and how to connect our audience, how to engage, how to activate our audiences. And even further fundamentally, us as business owners, we are solving problems. That's what a business is, right? We are solution providers at the end of the day. So I kind
Yeah,
of want to run it
absolutely.
back, and I'm going to just kind of highlight some of the talking points and just fill in anything that I might have missed. So I'd say, kind of starting out, as you mentioned, the understanding how to be a driver of the new tools, specifically as we talked about AI and anything else that comes, is beneficial to one, be focused, but also be the human who knows how to manage it. The second takeaway I heard is understanding the path, maybe to purchase in like your customer's journey and plugging in brand as almost a um, lean growth marketer at any level of your business from both the brand perspective and the allocating the necessary or the actual bandwidth that you have. And then lastly, again, the big thing that also stood out in terms of leverage is being smart in who you bring in and hiring the who's, right, instead of the hows, as they say, being one of the harder things because on the entrepreneurial journey, we know we try to work so hard for control and control of our life, control of our freedom, and then the other face of that is letting it go, right, to leverage and to grow. Is there anything
Yeah.
else you want to add to that as far as takeaways from this conversation?
No, I mean, I think you hit them pretty spot on. I think starting a business is never easy, right? And to your point, you have to just work through the problems that come up, right? There's so much that's outside of our control, from pandemics to great resignation to uh, hyper to inflation to AI, right? If there's anything that's true, it's going to be change, right?
Yeah.
Change is a constant. And I think it's just important to keep an eye on what your goals are and continually adjust that plan given the externals to figure out, okay, how am I going to get to where I want to go? And not get too caught up on, hey, it changed again, right?
Hmm.
You have to accept things the way they are and keep a positive mindset and just work through it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Brian. You're always a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate it. Where can people learn more about what you got going on today and kind of follow your journey?
Yeah, so I mean, we're Playbook Media, playbook.media or growtel.com are our websites. And then people can find me on LinkedIn, just Brian Karras. And that's generally where I post any of my updates. And you can always subscribe to our newsletters, etc.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, brother. To the next one. And again, I appreciate you being a guiding light and a teacher, and hope to have more of these great conversations with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Luis. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure, brother.